For years, I worked myself to the bone, juggling 2 jobs and giving up everything so my daughter could have her dream wedding in Houston. Then, during the reception, her grandfather stood up and made a toast that shattered my world. One DNA test later, I learned that my entire life had been built on a lie. My wife, my brother, half my family, they'd all known. And now, they're about to find out what happens when you betray a Texas man who's got nothing left to lose. My name's Dalton Reed. I'm 47 years old, and I live in Houston, Texas. For the last 4 years, I've been working double shifts at the oil refinery and picking up construction work on weekends just to save every dime. Not for me, but for Sierra, my 24-year-old daughter. Every sore muscle, every missed meal, every sleepless night was for her. She'd always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding, and I was determined to make it happen. Sierra is my whole world, smart, beautiful inside and out, with a laugh that could brighten any room. When she got engaged to Colton Hayes last year, I knew I had to give them the perfect day. Colton's a solid young man, works in tech, treats her right. They deserved the best. The wedding planning took over our lives. Nora, my wife of 26 years, threw herself into every detail like a general leading a campaign. Flowers, catering, decorations, music. She handled it all while I handled the bills. And those bills were steep. The venue alone cost more than my truck. But seeing Sierra's face light up when she first walked through that historic River Oaks mansion made every overtime shift worth it. Vernon Walsh, Nora's stepfather, got involved early on. At 67, he still carried himself like the businessman he once was. He'd always been close to our family, maybe too close, if I'm being honest. He had opinions on everything, the guest list, the food, even Sierra's dress. Nora always defended him, saying he just wanted to make up for the childhood he'd missed with her. The night before the wedding, I sat in the garage going over the last payments, feeling a pride I'd never known before. 4 years of sacrifice, 4 years of grinding, and tomorrow my little girl would finally have her dream wedding. I thought I'd done everything right, that I'd been the father she deserved. I couldn't have guessed that within 24 hours, everything I believed about my family, my life, and myself would unravel completely. If only I'd known that Vernon's toast would be the first domino to fall, the one that would destroy everything I held sacred. But I didn't know. Nothing could have prepared me for what came next. The wedding day seemed perfect. Sierra looked breathtaking, walking down the aisle in her grandmother's restored lace gown. The ceremony went smoothly, and the reception at the country club was exactly what we'd imagined. 300 guests, live band, open bar, the works. Watching my daughter dance with her husband, I felt like the luckiest man alive. Then came the toasts. Colton's best man had the crowd laughing with college stories. Sierra's maid of honor brought half the room to tears. Then Vernon stood up, and everything changed. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying that same business meeting confidence. I've watched this young woman grow up, and seeing her today fills me with pride. I smiled, raising my glass, expecting a typical grandfatherly speech. But then he kept going. People say Sierra has her father's determination and her mother's grace. But tonight, I see something deeper, something that goes beyond ordinary family traits. I see the bonds we choose to honor. Something about his words felt wrong. I glanced at Nora. She'd gone pale, gripping her wine glass like her life depended on it. Vernon lifted his glass higher. Sierra, you embody what family truly means. Not just the name you bear, but the love that shaped you, the guidance that formed you, and yes, the blood that runs through your veins. You are everything I ever hoped you'd become. The guests applauded, but I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The blood that runs through your veins. What the hell was that supposed to mean? I noticed people whispering, exchanging looks that told me they knew something I didn't. Nora slipped out right after the toast, saying she needed some air. I found her outside by the fountain, pacing like she was cornered. What was that about? I asked. What about? She said, not meeting my eyes. Vernon's speech. That comment about blood. You look like you'd seen a ghost. Nora forced a shaky laugh. You're reading too much into it, Dalton. Vernon just gets sentimental at family events. You know how he is. But the truth was, I didn't know how Vernon was. That tone in Vernon's voice, I'd never heard it before. It wasn't emotion. It was something darker, something that twisted my gut, and sent my thoughts spiraling toward possibilities I didn't want to face. The rest of the reception passed like a dream I couldn't wake from. Cutting the cake, dancing, shaking hands with guests, I did it all on autopilot. But Vernon's words wouldn't stop echoing in my mind. The more I replayed them, the worse they sounded. And the more I watched Nora, the more certain I became that she was hiding something. That night, after Sierra and Colton left for their honeymoon, I sat alone in my recliner, staring at the wall. For years of breaking my back, saving, sacrificing, all for a day that should have been nothing but joy. Instead, I felt like the world's biggest fool. Something in my family was terribly wrong, and I was going to uncover it. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a kind of determination that felt like steel in my stomach. Nora was already in the kitchen, making coffee like it was just another Sunday. But it wasn't. Not anymore. "We need to talk," I said from the doorway. She glanced up, pretending confusion. "About what?" "About Vernon's toast. About your reaction. About whatever the hell you've been hiding from me." She sighed, poured herself a cup of coffee, and didn't offer me one. "Dalton, you're making something out of nothing. Vernon was just emotional." "That's bull," I said flatly. "I've known that man over 20 years, and I've never seen him talk like that. And I've never seen you look like that." Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted her mug. "I don't know what you want me to say." "I want the truth," I said, stepping into the kitchen, keeping my voice steady. "What did Vernon mean about Sierra's blood? Why did you look like you'd seen a ghost?" She turned her back to me, staring out the window. "You're being paranoid, Dalton. The stress, the long hours, it's getting to you." That's when I knew she was lying. The Nora I used to know would have faced me head on, not dodged every question. Whoever this woman was, she wasn't the wife I thought I had. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "If you won't tell me, I'll find out myself." I walked out of that kitchen with my mind set. I'd spent my whole life trusting people, taking their word as truth, believing that love meant honesty. That ended that morning. I drove straight to the library and spent 3 hours researching DNA paternity tests. The process was simpler than I'd imagined. A cheek swab, a hair sample, mail it in, and wait. No court orders, no permissions. Just a father wanting the truth. The hardest part was getting Sierra's DNA without her knowing. She and Colton were in Hawaii, but her old bedroom was untouched. On the dresser sat her hairbrush, still holding strands of her blonde hair. I collected them carefully, my stomach in knots. It felt like betrayal, but I needed to know. A man has a right to learn whether the child he's poured his life into is truly his own blood. I ordered the fastest, most expensive test I could find. Rush processing, 72-hour results. Normally, I'd never spend that kind of money. But this wasn't a normal situation. When I dropped that package off at FedEx, I felt a strange mix of dread and relief. In 3 days, I'd have my answer. In 3 days, I'd know if my entire life had been a lie. Those 72 hours crawled by. I worked, nodded through conversations, went through the motions, but inside I was counting down every second. Nora kept pretending everything was fine, chatting about Sierra's honeymoon photos and Colton's new job, and I pretended right along with her. But inside, I felt like a man waiting for his own execution. The email arrived at 2:47 p.m. on Wednesday. I was in the refinery break room when my phone buzzed. My hands trembled as I opened it, clicked the link, and saw the words, "Probability of paternity, 0%. I stared at that number until my vision blurred. 0. Not 5, not 50. 0. Sierra wasn't my daughter. The little girl I'd raised, the woman I'd worked myself half to death for, the bride I'd just watched walk down the aisle. She wasn't mine. I sat there for 20 minutes, barely breathing. Guys came and went, probably thinking I was sick. Maybe I was. My chest felt like it was caving in. But then the shock gave way to something else. Not grief. Not disbelief. Rage. For 24 years, I'd been living a lie, the loyal fool in someone else's game. Thousands of dollars, all spent to celebrate a lie. When I got home that evening, Nora was sitting in the living room, half watching some cooking show. The moment she saw my face, I watched the color drain from hers. "We need to talk," I said, holding up my phone with the DNA results on the screen. Her expression collapsed like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. "What is that?" she whispered. "DNA test results. Sierra isn't my daughter." My tone was even, but beneath it was steel. "Want to explain that to me?" Nora's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Dalton, I can explain. 24 years. I cut her off, my voice rising. For 24 years, I've been raising another man's child. I worked myself into the ground to pay for her wedding. And you knew, didn't you? Tears streamed down her cheeks, but I felt nothing. No pity. No warmth. That part of me was gone. Who is it? I demanded. Who's Sierra's real father? She couldn't meet my eyes. It's not what you think. It's Vernon, isn't it? I snapped. The puzzle pieces clicked together in my head, sickeningly clear now. His constant presence, his pride at the wedding, the look they'd shared during that toast, it all made sense. Nora buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. But she didn't deny it. That was all the confirmation I needed. I stared at the woman I'd shared a life with for over 2 decades, the woman I'd trusted with my heart, my future, everything I had. She'd stolen it all, my youth, my savings, my faith and family. She'd turned me into a willing fool in my own tragedy. Pack your things, I said quietly. I want you out tonight. For the first time in our marriage, I meant every single word. Nora left that night with one suitcase and a river of tears. But I had no sympathy to spare. I had bigger things to uncover, starting with Vernon and how long this web of deceit had been spinning. But first, I needed to talk to someone I still believed I could trust. My brother Garrett had always been that person. 3 years older than me, best man at my wedding, Sierra's favorite uncle. If anyone knew something, it would be him. The next morning, I drove out to his auto shop in Bel Air. Dalton, he called from under the hood of a Silverado. You look like hell, brother. What's going on? We need to talk, I said, glancing toward his mechanics. Privately. Something in my tone must have warned him, because his smile faded. He wiped his hands on a greasy rag and led me into the office behind the bay. What's going on? He asked, closing the door. I handed him my phone. Sierra's not mine. She's Vernon's daughter. I expected shock, outrage, something. Instead, Garrett stared at the floor for a long, heavy moment. Garrett, I said sharply. Did you hear me? Yeah, he said softly. I heard you. That's when it hit me like a freight train. You knew. You knew, didn't you? He finally looked up, guilt written all over his face. Dalton, it wasn't my place to. How long? I roared, standing. How long have you known I've been raising another man's child? He swallowed hard. Since before she was born, he admitted. I saw Nora and Vernon together. At a hotel in Galveston. About 9 months before Sierra came along. His words tore through me worse than Nora's lies ever could. My own brother, the man I'd trusted more than anyone, had stood by for 24 years, watching me break my back for a lie. You watched me work myself into the ground, I said, my voice cold and deadly. You watched me kill myself for that wedding, and you said nothing. I tried once, Garrett said desperately. When Sierra was about 10, remember? I started to tell you, but you were so happy. I couldn't destroy that. That wasn't your choice to make. I exploded, slamming my fist on his desk. I had the right to know, the right to decide how to live my own damn life. Garrett flinched, but didn't back away. What would you have done, Dalton? Really? Would you have divorced Nora? Walked away from a little girl who thought you were her dad? His words hung in the air like poison. He was right about one thing. I wouldn't have left Sierra, but I might have lived differently. I might have demanded answers. I might have had the chance to raise children who were truly mine. Get out of my sight, I said quietly. And don't come near my house again. As far as I'm concerned, I don't have a brother. I walked out of that shop feeling emptier than I'd ever felt. My wife had betrayed me. My daughter wasn't mine. And my own brother had been part of the lie. The only question left was, how deep did this betrayal go, and who else had been laughing behind my back? That evening I drove out to Vernon's place in River Oaks, not caring how I must have looked, a man teetering on the brink. Because that's exactly what I was, and Vernon Walsh was about to find out what happens when you push Dalton Reed too far. He opened the door in his usual pressed khakis and polo, like he'd just stepped off a country club green. His face moved from surprise to a tired caution the moment he saw me. Dalton, he said carefully, this is unexpected. We need to talk, I said, cutting him off as I pushed into his marble foyer. About Sierra. About the lie you've kept for 24 years. Vernon closed the door slowly, buying time. I don't know what you mean, he replied. I held up my phone and showed him the DNA results. 0% probability of paternity. Care to explain that? I asked. His expression hardly changed, but there was a flicker of something behind his eyes, not shock, not denial, but almost a weary relief, like a man who'd carried a burden too long. How did you find out? He asked. That was his answer. Not denial, not apology, just a question about my method. I stepped closer, using every inch of my 6'2" frame. You arrogant piece of garbage, I said. How long did you think you could get away with this? Vernon straightened, putting on that businessman's posture I used to respect. I never meant for it to happen, Dalton. Nora and I, we had history before she met you. History? I interrupted. She was your stepdaughter. You were married to her mother when Sierra was conceived. It was complicated, he murmured, and his voice had no force behind it. These things happen. These things happen. I repeated, my voice climbing. You stole my life, Vernon. 24 years of my life. I busted my ass to pay for that wedding while you sat there talking about blood and family bonds. The very blood you were talking about was yours. For the first time, Vernon looked genuinely uneasy. The wedding was beautiful. Sierra was radiant. You gave her a perfect day? You gave her a perfect day with my money, with my sacrifice, with my sweat and tears, I shot back. While he stood there making speeches about family, he'd known the truth the whole time. Slowly, his mask slipped, and I saw the man beneath. Not the revered businessman or doting grandfather, but a selfish predator who built his comfort on other people's suffering. What do you want, Dalton? He asked finally. Money? Some arrangement? We can work something out. I grabbed him by the shirt and slammed him against his own front door. What I want is 24 years of my life back. I want to never have met you or your lying stepdaughter. Since I can't have that, I'll make sure everyone in this city knows exactly who Vernon Walsh is. For the first time I saw fear in his eyes. You wouldn't do that to Sierra, to her reputation, he pleaded. Sierra will learn the truth one way or another, I said, shoving him away. The question is if she hears it from me, or reads it in the paper when I'm done with you. I left his house with a plan forming in my head. Vernon thought his money and connections made him untouchable. He was wrong. The next morning I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Vernon Walsh had a spotless public image, respected businessman, community leader. Time to show Houston who he really was. But words alone wouldn't be enough. I needed proof that would bury him so deep he could never claw back out. I started by hiring a private investigator, Jake Martinez, a former Houston PD detective who now specialized in corporate fraud and personal scandals. His office was in a strip mall near the Galleria, nothing fancy, but his reputation was gold. I need everything you can find on Vernon Walsh, I told him, sliding a retainer check across his desk. Financial records, business dealings, personal relationships, everything. Jake looked over the DNA results I'd brought. This is paternity fraud, he said. This is a man who's been playing games with your life for over 2 decades. I'll dig up every dirty secret he's buried. That was the start. I was done being the fool. Within 48 hours, Jake hit pay dirt. Vernon's construction firm had been padding municipal contracts for years, inflating bids, skimping on materials. There were also shady tax filings and unreported offshore accounts in the Caymans. Your friend's got his hands in a lot of cookie jars, Jake said, spreading the files across his desk. This is enough to get federal investigators involved. But the real jackpot was Vern's personal life. Jake uncovered hotel receipts, restaurant tabs, and jewelry charges that sketched a decades-long pattern of affairs, not just with Nora, but with at least 3 other women, including his current secretary. He targets vulnerable women, Jake said. Promises to help them financially in exchange for companionship. Perfect. I had Vern on tax evasion, municipal fraud, and a long history of predatory behavior. Time to make Houston's business class see what kind of man they'd been dealing with. I anonymously mailed the financial records to 3 reporters at the Houston Chronicle, then sent copies to the city attorney and the Harris County DA. By week's end, Vernon Walsh would be radioactive. But I wasn't finished. He'd stolen 24 years of my life. I intended to make him pay for every single one. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning. I was at the refinery when my phone lit up with alerts. Houston businessman under investigation for municipal fraud, read the Channel 2 headline. By noon, every major outlet was running the story. I took an early lunch and drove downtown to Vernon's office building. News vans and reporters swarmed the parking lot. I parked across the street and watched it all with a grim satisfaction. Vernon left the building around 2 o'clock, flanked by expensive-looking attorneys. Even from a distance, he looked worn, a man unused to being held to account. My phone rang. Sierra calling from Hawaii. "Dad," she said, voice trembling. "I'm seeing stuff about Grandpa Vernon on the news." "What's happening?" The conversation I'd been dreading. "Sweetheart, enjoy the rest of your honeymoon. When you get home, we'll talk. There are family things you need to hear." "Is this about Mom?" she asked. "Someone posted that she's at Aunt Linda's." I closed my eyes. Gossip moves fast, whether in small towns or big cities. "Just focus on being happy with Colton," I told her. "We'll sort this out when you return." That evening Jake called. "Vernon's trying to move money. Transferred $250,000 to a Cayman account yesterday. Looks like he's getting ready to flee." "Can you trace it?" I asked. "Working on it. But listen, he's hired heavy legal firepower. This isn't just a news story anymore. They'll try to hit you with harassment or defamation claims." "Let them," I said. "I've got nothing to hide." That night, I sat alone in the quiet house, staring at wedding photos from a week earlier. Sierra looked so happy, so radiant, utterly unaware her whole family stood on lies. A part of me wondered if I was right to tear that illusion down. Then I remembered 24 years of being the fool, of working myself to the bone for a lie, and my resolve hardened. Vernon Walsh had chosen his path. Now he'd face the consequences. Sierra and Colton flew back on Thursday. Even in Hawaii, the Vernon story had found them. She deserved answers, and I arranged to meet them that evening, along with someone else who needed to hear the truth. I tracked down Vernon's mother, Willow Walsh, an 89-year-old living in a Kingwood retirement community. When I called and told her what her son had done, her reply surprised me. "I've been waiting for this day for 20 years, she said, her voice sharp despite her age. "Vernon's always been selfish. What he did to you and that girl is unforgivable." That evening she sat in my living room in a wheelchair, while Sierra and Colton sat on the couch. I braced myself for the moment. Seeing Sierra's confused, frightened face still twisted my gut. "Dad, what's going on?" she asked. "The news about Vernon. Mom's staying at Aunt Linda's. You look like you haven't slept in days." I took a slow breath and handed her the DNA results. "Sierra, there's something you need to know about who your real father is. I'm not your biological dad." The words seemed to strike her physically. She stared at the paper, her hands trembling. "What are you talking about? That's impossible." "Vernon Walsh is your real father," I said softly. "He and your mother had an affair 24 years ago. I raised you all this time believing you were mine." Colton put an arm around Sierra as tears streamed down her face. "That can't be true. Vern is my grandfather, Mom's stepfather." Willow Walsh's voice sliced through the silence. "My son seduced his own stepdaughter and let another man raise their child. I'm ashamed he's part of our family." Sierra looked at us, her world collapsing. "You all knew?" "I only found out a week ago," I said. "After your wedding. Something Vernon said in his toast made me suspicious, so I got a DNA test." "My wedding?" Sierra whispered. "You spent 4 years paying for my wedding, and I'm not even your daughter." I knelt in front of her, holding her hands. "Listen to me, Sierra. Biology doesn't make a father. Love does. Being there for every scraped knee, every school play, every milestone. That's what matters. Vernon gave you DNA. I gave you everything else." She threw her arms around me, sobbing. "I'm so sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry you found out this way." "You have nothing to be sorry for," I said firmly. "This is on Vernon and your mother, not you." Willow moved closer in her wheelchair. "Sierra, sweetheart, you need to know Vernon's crimes go far beyond paternity lies. He's been stealing from the city, evading taxes, manipulating women for years. You're better off without him." "Where is he now?" Colton asked. "Federal marshals arrested him this morning," I said. "Tax evasion, wire fraud, conspiracy. He's facing 10 to 15 years in prison." Sierra looked at me through tears. "What about us? What about our family?" "You're my daughter," I said without hesitation. "Colton's my son-in-law. That hasn't changed. The only difference is that we no longer have to pretend Vernon and your mother are part of our lives." 8 months later, I stood in my backyard, watching Sierra and Colton plant a vegetable garden where Nora's flowers used to grow. It was a crisp April morning, the kind that feels like a new beginning. The divorce was finalized in February. Nora kept her car, and enough money to start over in Austin with her sister. I kept the house, my savings, and most importantly, my self-respect. Vernon was serving his time in a federal prison in Beaumont, his reputation destroyed, his assets seized. Sierra handled the truth better than I could have imagined. Once the shock faded, she almost seemed relieved, as if things finally made sense. She cut off Nora completely, but kept me close. Our bond was stronger than ever. "Dad?" she called from the garden. "Where do you want the tomatoes?" "Wherever they'll get the most sun," I said, smiling at how normal that felt. The word "dad" had a new meaning, not because of shared blood, but because of shared love. Vernon had tried reaching out, but I wasn't ready. Maybe someday, but trust takes time to rebuild. For now, I focused on the family who chose to stay. Willow had become a loyal friend. At 89, she was sharper than ever, and her disgust with her son's actions had brought us closer. She joined us for Sunday dinners, telling Sierra family stories that didn't involve Vernon's crimes. Investigator Jake Martinez became something of a legend in Houston. The Vernon Walsh case sparked a wider probe into city corruption, leading to multiple arrests. His phone hasn't stopped ringing since. As for me, I went back to one job. Turns out, when you're not supporting a deceitful wife or covering lies, you don't need that much money. I even started taking evening classes at Houston Community College, something I'd always wanted but never could. The refinery didn't feel like a prison anymore. It was honest work for an honest life. "You know what I've been thinking?" Sierra said, walking over with dirt-stained hands and a bright smile. "What's that, sweetheart?" "I want to change my last name. From Walsh back to Reed. Vernon doesn't deserve to be part of who I am." I felt a surge of pride, relief, maybe both. "You sure about that?" "I've never been more sure of anything. You're my real father, and I want everyone to know it." Standing there, sunlight on her face, determination in her eyes, I realized something profound. Sometimes betrayal leads to truth. Vernon and Nora had stolen years from me, but they'd given me something priceless, absolute clarity about what matters most. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by choice, loyalty, and love that endures, even when everything else falls apart.